The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang soft music when light touched them. Its ceiling showed the stars themselves, spinning slowly overhead like diamonds scattered across black silk. Representatives from 47 species sat in a massive circle, each delegation on platforms that floated above a floor of pure light. This was the Galactic Council, the rulers of civilized space. The oldest and most powerful species in existence gathered here to decide the fate of younger races. Today, they were deciding the fate of humanity. Ambassador Sirveth of the Kelthari stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall, nearly 3 meters, with a body covered in hard black plates and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. His species had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 9,000 years. They had never lost a war. They had never shown mercy to their enemies. And they had never respected the humans. Fellow council members, Sirveth began, his voice clicking and buzzing through the translator devices everyone wore. We gather today to discuss humanity's request for full membership in our great alliance. They have been observers for 30 years. They believe they have earned the right to stand among us as equals. He paused and looked around the chamber. His compound eyes reflected the light of 1,000 stars. I am here to tell you why they have not. The human delegation sat on a small platform near the back of the hall. There were only 3 of them. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, sat in the middle. 2 assistants flanked her. They looked small compared to the massive aliens around them. Fragile. Soft. Sirveth pointed one of his claws at them. Look at them, he said. Look at these creatures who wish to call themselves our equals. Their bodies have no armor. Their claws are dull. Their teeth are flat. A single Kelthari warrior could kill 10 of them without effort. 100 of them. They are prey animals who learn to use tools. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Rekith delegation made wet, gurgling sounds that passed for amusement among their kind. The Vorn hegemony representatives clicked their approval. Elena Vasquez did not react. She simply watched and listened. But physical weakness can be forgiven, Sirveth continued. Many species are weak in body but strong in spirit. The Methylari are small and soft, yet they fight with courage when threatened. The Dross have no natural weapons, yet they built an empire through fierce determination. He shook his head slowly. Humans have neither courage nor determination. Humans fear war. A hush fell over the chamber. This was a serious accusation. Among the elder species, cowardice was the greatest sin. A species that would not fight for itself did not deserve to exist. I present the evidence, Sirveth said. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of human space with dozens of markers. 30 years ago, the Dravosi raiders attacked human colony worlds. They burned 3 cities. They killed thousands. The humans had the ships to strike back. They had the weapons. They had every right under galactic law to demand blood payment. He let the words hang in the air. They did nothing. They evacuated their people and asked for peace talks. Another marker lit up on the map. 12 years ago, the Vorn hegemony claimed 3 human space stations near the border. These stations were legally human territory. The humans had documentation. They had treaties. They had a fleet that could have taken those stations back. Sirveth's mandibles clicked with disgust. They filed a complaint with this council. They asked for sanctions. They used words instead of weapons. More markers appeared. More incidents. More times when humanity had chosen to talk instead of fight, to retreat instead of attack, to negotiate instead of destroy. Every time they face conflict, they run, Sirveth concluded. Every time they have the chance to prove themselves, they show us exactly what they are. Cowards. Weaklings. A species so afraid of death that they will accept any insult, any injury, any shame, rather than risk a fight. He turned to face the human delegation directly. Ambassador Vasquez, do you deny this? Can you name a single time in the past century when humanity chose war over peace? Elena Vasquez stood slowly. She was not a tall woman. She was not impressive to look at. She wore simple clothes, no jewelry, no symbols of rank beyond a small pin on her collar showing Earth. No, she said quietly. I cannot deny it. We have chosen peace whenever possible. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Even humans admitted their own cowardice. Then you understand why we cannot accept you, Sirveth said. The galaxy is dangerous. The strong survive. The weak are conquered. That is the way of things. A species that fears war has no place among those who rule the stars. Elena nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. May I speak? She asked. High Arbiter Jolan, the ancient being who led the council, waved his permission. He was old beyond measure, his body more machine than flesh now, his eyes holding the weight of countless centuries. You may speak, human. Though I doubt it will change anything. Elena stepped forward. Her platform floated to the center of the chamber, putting her among the giants and monsters who ruled the galaxy. You see our choice of peace as weakness, she said. You see our reluctance to fight as fear. You believe that because we do not rush to war, we must be afraid of it. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, built empires on the bones of their enemies. You are wrong. The Rikith delegate laughed again. Then explain yourself, little human. Tell us why we should not see you as the prey animals you clearly are. Elena smiled. It was not a warm smile. I could tell you about human history, she said. I could tell you about the thousands of wars we fought among ourselves before we ever reached the stars. I could tell you about weapons we created that could burn entire continents. I could tell you about the times we nearly destroyed our own species through our love of violence. She paused. But you would not believe me. You look at us and see small, soft creatures. You cannot imagine that we are dangerous. So I will not try to convince you. She turned to face Sirveth directly. I will simply say this. We do not choose peace because we fear war. We choose peace because we know what war costs. We have paid that price so many times that we learned to value what peace brings. You see our restraint as weakness. We see it as wisdom. Sirveth laughed, a harsh clicking sound. Wisdom? You call cowardice wisdom? You dress up your fear in pretty words. Human. But we see through it. We see what you really are. Elena Vasquez said nothing more. She simply returned to her seat and sat down. High Arbiter Jolan raised his staff. The council will vote. All in favor of granting humanity full membership status? Not a single hand, claw, or tentacle was raised. All opposed. The chamber filled with raised appendages. Every species. Every delegation. Unanimous rejection. Then it is decided, Jolan said. Humanity will remain observers. Perhaps in another century, when they have learned to fight for themselves, we will consider their request again. The council members began to leave. Many of them laughed as they passed the human delegation. Some made insulting gestures. None showed respect. Elena Vasquez gathered her documents and stood to leave. Her assistants looked upset, angry at the humiliation they had suffered. But Elena's face showed no emotion at all. As she walked out of the chamber, she pulled out a small communication device and typed a single message to Earth. It said, "They still do not understand." Then she put the device away and walked into the night, leaving the laughing aliens behind her. She did not know that in 6 months, those same aliens would beg humanity for help. She did not know that the galaxy was about to learn exactly what humans were capable of. But somewhere deep inside, she suspected that the lesson was coming, and she knew it would be a lesson none of them would ever forget. 6 months after the Council rejected humanity, the galaxy changed forever. It began with silence. The Outer Rim colonies stopped sending messages. At first, no one worried. Communication systems failed sometimes. Solar storms disrupted signals. Technical problems happened, then the silence spread. One system after another went dark. Colony worlds that had existed for thousands of years simply stopped responding. Ships sent to investigate never returned. Within 3 weeks, an entire sector of space had gone quiet. The Kelthari were the first to respond with force. They were proud warriors who had never known defeat. When their border colonies went silent, they did not send diplomats. They sent a war fleet. 4,000 ships gathered at the Talos Barrier, the great defensive line that protected the inner galaxy from the unknown darkness beyond. Admiral Kethral, the most decorated commander in Kelthari history, led them personally. He had destroyed 17 enemy civilizations in his long career. He had never lost a battle. He sent a message to the Galactic Council before entering the Dark Zone. We will discover what threatens our colonies and we will destroy it. This is what true warriors do. Perhaps the humans can learn from our example. The Council received his message and waited for his victory report. Instead, they received 11 minutes of screaming. The battle recordings were fragmented and filled with static, but what they showed was enough to freeze the blood of every species that watched. The enemy had come from the void between galaxies. They called themselves nothing because they did not communicate. The council named them the Vthkai, an ancient word meaning hunger without end. They were not a species in any normal sense. They were something older, something that had existed before the first stars formed. Their ships were not built from metal. They were grown from organic matter, living things the size of moons that moved through space like great beasts swimming through an ocean. And they did not conquer. They harvested. The recordings showed Kelthari warships firing everything they had at the Vthkai vessels. Energy beams that could cut through planets barely scratched the organic hulls. Missiles exploded against flesh that healed itself in seconds. The Kelthari fought with all their skill and all their fury. It did not matter. The Vthkai ships opened themselves like mouths and swallowed the Kelthari fleet whole. They consumed the ships, the crew, everything. They broke down matter itself and added it to their own mass. 4,000 warships became nothing but raw material for the enemy to grow larger. Admiral Kethral's last transmission was a single word, repeated over and over in a voice that had lost all pride, all courage, all hope. Run, 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 run. Then the signal ended. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. For the first time in recorded history, the Great Hall of Nexus Prime was filled not with pride but with fear. "What are these things?" demanded the Reketh delegate. His species was known for their cruelty, their love of causing pain. Now he trembled like a child in the dark. "Ancient records speak of them," High Arbiter Jolan said. His ancient voice was heavy with dread. "They appeared once before, 12,000 years ago. They consumed 17 civilizations before they went dormant. We thought they were a myth, a legend. We were wrong." "What stopped them last time?" asked the Vorn representative. Jolan shook his head. "We do not know. The records were lost. Perhaps they simply ate everything they wanted and went back to sleep. Perhaps something drove them away. We have no way of knowing." On the great display in the center of the chamber, red markers showed the Vthkai advance. They moved slowly but steadily, consuming everything in their path. Colony worlds vanished. Defense stations disappeared. Entire fleets were swallowed without slowing the enemy down. "We must unite our forces," Sirveth said. His voice was different now. 6 months ago, he had mocked humanity with such confidence. Now he sounded desperate. "Every species must send their fleets. Together, we can." "Together we can what?" interrupted the Methilari delegate, a small creature covered in silver fur. "The Kelthari had 4,000 ships. The Vthkai destroyed them in minutes. We could send 40,000 ships and the result would be the same. Then what do you suggest? That we simply wait to be eaten? I suggest that we run. We abandon the outer systems and fall back to the core worlds. Perhaps if we give them enough to eat, they will go dormant again." Arguments exploded across the chamber. Some demanded attack, some demanded retreat. Some simply sat in silence, their minds unable to accept what was happening. The Dravosi sealed their borders completely, refusing to let anyone in or out. The Reketh began evacuating their population to hidden bunker worlds. The Vorn hegemony, the same species that had taken human stations because they knew humans would not fight back, sent desperate messages to the Vthkai offering surrender. The Vthkai did not respond. They simply kept coming, kept consuming, kept growing. Within 2 months, the enemy had consumed everything outside the Telos barrier. 200 colony worlds, 15 species, trillions of lives, all gone. All turned into raw material for the hungry darkness. High Arbiter Jolan sat alone in his chambers, staring at the map of the galaxy. Red covered everything beyond the inner systems. Red that spread a little further every day. He thought about all the species the Council had rejected over the centuries. The weak ones, the cowardly ones, the ones who did not measure up to the standards of the elder races. He thought about humanity. And then he did something that no High Arbiter had done in 3,000 years. He sent a formal request for help. Not to another Council species, not to one of the great powers, to Earth. The response came within an hour. It was not from Ambassador Vasquez. It was from a human military officer named Admiral Marcus Cole. Jolan read the message 3 times, trying to understand it. "We were never afraid of war. We were afraid of what we become when we stop fearing it. But you need monsters now. So we will show you what humanity has spent centuries trying to forget." Attached to the message was a fleet deployment order. Human ships were already moving toward the Telos barrier. Not a small force. Not a token gesture. Everything. Every warship humanity possessed was coming. Jolan stared at the deployment numbers. Then he pulled up the Council's intelligence files on human military forces. The files were nearly empty. Humanity had always been so peaceful that no one had bothered to spy on their military. No one had thought it mattered. Now Jolan wondered what else the Council had failed to notice about the species they had laughed at for 30 years. He sent a message to Ambassador Vasquez requesting a meeting with Admiral Cole before the human fleet arrived. "I need to understand," he wrote. "Why are you helping us? We mocked you. We rejected you. We called you cowards." The response came from Vasquez herself. "You did all of those things. But you are still living beings who will be eaten if someone does not stop the Vthkai. That is enough reason for us." She added a final line that made Jolan's blood run cold. "But I must warn you. You asked to see what humanity is capable of. You are about to find out. And once you see it, you will never look at us the same way again. You may wish you had let the Vthkai take you instead." Jolan read the message again and again. He did not understand what she meant, but in 3 days, when the human fleet arrived at Nexus Prime, he would understand perfectly. And she was right. He would never look at humanity the same way again. No one in the galaxy would. The human fleet arrived at Nexus Prime on a cold morning when the stars seemed dimmer than usual. High Arbiter Jolan stood on the observation deck with the other council leaders, watching the ships emerge from faster-than-light travel. He expected to see something similar to other species' fleets, sleek vessels with elegant lines, bright colors showing national pride, beautiful weapons designed to kill with efficiency. What he saw made him take a step backward. The human ships were ugly. There was no other word for them. They were covered in thick, overlapping plates of armor that made them look like animals wrapped in protective shells. They had no smooth lines, no graceful curves. They were boxes and angles and brutal shapes designed for only one purpose: survival. "What are those?" whispered the Reketh delegate. His voice was filled with confusion. "Those cannot be warships. They look like something built by creatures who expect to be hurt," Ambassador Vasquez said. She had joined them on the observation deck. Her face showed no emotion. "Because we do. We always expect to be hurt. So we build our ships to take damage and keep fighting." Sirvith stepped forward, his compound eyes studying the human vessels. "They have no energy weapons. I see only kinetic launchers and... Are those chemical explosives?" "Yes. Missiles, bombs, shells filled with metal and fire. But energy weapons are superior in every way. They are faster, more accurate, more powerful." Vasquez smiled that cold smile again. "Energy weapons are clean, efficient, civilized." She paused. "We do not fight clean wars." The council members exchanged glances. They did not understand. Admiral Marcus Cole arrived an hour later. He was a tall man with gray hair cut short and eyes that seemed to look through everything. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations except a single row of small ribbons on his chest. Each ribbon represented a campaign. There were 47 of them. "Thank you for coming," Jolan said. "We are grateful for your assistance." Cole nodded. "You should not be grateful yet. You do not know what you have asked for." He walked to the main display and began pulling up files. Images appeared on the screen. Documents, videos, things that humanity had kept hidden from the galaxy for centuries. "You called us cowards," Cole said. His voice was flat, without anger. "You said we feared war. You were wrong. We do not fear war. We fear ourselves in war." He showed them human history. They watched footage of ancient battles where humans killed each other with swords and spears, fighting in mud and blood until no one was left standing. They saw the first guns, the first bombs, the first weapons that could kill from a distance. They saw the nuclear fire, a single bomb falling from the sky, a city of hundreds of thousands of people, a flash of light, and then nothing. Just ash and shadows burned into stone where people had stood. "We did this to ourselves," Cole said. "Not once, twice. And we built thousands more of these weapons, enough to burn our entire planet many times over. We pointed them at each other and waited for someone to make a mistake." The council members watched in horror. No species had ever used such weapons on their own kind. The idea was insane. "That is not the worst of it," Cole continued. He showed them the biological weapons, diseases created in laboratories, designed to spread fast and kill faster. He showed them the chemical agents that melted flesh and destroyed lungs. He showed them the autonomous weapons, machines built to hunt and kill without human control. We made these things, Cole said. And then we made treaties, promising never to use them. We buried them. We pretended they did not exist, because we knew what would happen if we ever let ourselves use them again. Sirveth found his voice. Why? Why would any species do this to itself? Cole looked at him. Because we are very good at killing. Better than any species you have ever encountered. We evolved on a world where everything wanted to eat us, poison us, or crush us. We survived by being more violent than anything else. Violence is in our blood, in our bones, in our souls. He pulled up more files. Military training footage. Human soldiers running through simulations designed to break their minds. Psychological conditioning that taught them to ignore pain, ignore fear, ignore everything except the mission. Your soldiers trained to win battles, Cole said. Our soldiers trained to survive anything, to keep fighting when their bodies are broken, to complete objectives even when they know they will die. We have an entire science dedicated to understanding trauma because we create so much of it. High Arbiter Jolan felt sick. This is monstrous. Yes, Cole agreed. It is. That is why we hide it. That is why we choose peace whenever we can. Every time we go to war, we lose a piece of ourselves. We become something terrible, something we hate. He paused. But sometimes, something worse comes along. Something that leaves no choice. He changed the display to show the Vthkai, the living ships, the consumed worlds, the spreading darkness. These things do not negotiate. They do not surrender. They do not stop. They understand only one language. Cole looked at the council. And we speak that language better than anyone in this galaxy. He pulled up the final file. It was labeled Omega Protocols. These are humanity's forbidden weapons, Cole said. The things we swore we would never use again. Mass drivers that can shatter planets. Biological agents that unravel DNA. Machines that will hunt for centuries. Bombs that tear holes in the fabric of space itself. The council stared at the list. It went on and on. Weapon after weapon, each more terrible than the last. Each one capable of destruction on a scale they had never imagined. You buried these, Jolan whispered. We buried them because we are ashamed of them, Cole said. We buried them because they represent everything we do not want to be. But we did not destroy them, because somewhere deep inside, we knew that one day, something would come that required us to dig them up again. He closed the files and faced the council directly. You asked why we always chose peace. Now you know. Peace is not weakness. Peace is the chain we put on ourselves to keep the monster inside from breaking free. He walked toward the door. The Vthkai have forced us to remove that chain. We will stop them. We will save your worlds and your people. But understand this clearly. He turned back one final time. We will not enjoy what we are about to do. We will hate ourselves for every life we take, every weapon we fire, every terrible act we commit. But we will do it anyway. Because that is what humans do. We sacrifice pieces of our souls so that others can live. He left the room. The council sat in silence for a long time. Finally, the Rekith delegate spoke. His voice was small, frightened. What have we awakened? No one had an answer. 3 days later, the human fleet departed for the front lines. 2,000 ships carrying weapons that could end civilizations. And inside those ships, millions of humans prepared to become the monsters they had spent centuries trying to forget they were. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity truly was. The lesson would be written in fire and blood and screaming stars. And no one who witnessed it would ever call humans cowards again. The Vthkai came to the Kairos threshold on a day when 3 suns aligned in the sky. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. Instead, it became a day of fire. 12 Harbinger fleets emerged from the darkness between stars. 50,000 organic vessels, each one a living nightmare that hungered for matter and life. They moved like a tide of shadows, blocking out the light of distant stars as they advanced. The Galactic Council had placed observation drones throughout the system. Every species wanted to watch the battle. Some hoped to see humanity defeated, proving that the Council had been right to reject them. Most simply wanted to see what would happen when the monsters met the monsters. The human fleet waited at the threshold. 2,000 ships against 50,000. Everyone watching knew the numbers. Everyone expected the humans to retreat, to fall back to a stronger position, to do what they had always done. The humans did not retreat. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the flagship unconquered. His face was calm, his voice was steady. "All ships," he said, "weapons free. Execute attack pattern, Omega." The human fleet charged, not formed into defensive lines, not holding position. They accelerated directly toward the enemy at maximum speed, spreading out into a formation that looked like chaos but was actually carefully planned. The Vthkai had never seen prey attack before. They hesitated for 3 seconds, their ancient minds confused by this behavior. 3 seconds was all the humans needed. The first wave of destroyers punched through the gaps in the enemy formation. They were small ships, fast and fragile, designed to do one thing: get close. Each destroyer carried a single weapon, an antimatter warhead powerful enough to crack a moon. They did not fire from a distance. They flew directly into the Vthkai vessels and detonated themselves. 20 ships, 20 explosions, 20 holes torn in the enemy fleet. The observers watching from Nexus Prime gasped. The destroyers had not ejected their crews. The pilots had stayed at their controls until the moment of detonation, steering by hand to ensure their weapons hit the right targets. "They killed themselves," whispered the Methalari delegate. "They chose to die." Ambassador Vasquez stood beside him, her face pale. "Yes, they volunteered. Every one of them knew they would not survive. They went anyway." The battle continued. Human carriers opened their bays and released thousands of fighter craft. Single-pilot vessels barely larger than ground vehicles, armed with missiles and guns and nothing else. No shields, no armor, just engines and weapons and a human being willing to fly into hell. The fighters swarmed the Vthkai like insects attacking giants. They fired their missiles and then, when their ammunition was gone, they rammed themselves into the enemy's organic hulls, detonating their fuel cells on impact. Wave after wave of fighters died, and wave after wave kept coming. The Vthkai began to respond. Their living ships opened mouths lined with teeth made of crystal and darkness. They reached out with tentacles the size of buildings. They consumed human ships whole, just as they had consumed the Kelthari fleet. But unlike the Kelthari, the humans did not break. The battleship Relentless took 17 direct hits. Its armor was torn away. Its engines were destroyed. Half its crew was dead. The survivors sealed the breaches with emergency foam mixed with their own blood to make it set faster. The weapons crews kept firing. The cruiser Never Surrender was cut in half by a Vthkai energy beam. The front section, still containing living crew, accelerated toward the nearest enemy vessel and detonated its reactor core, taking the Vthkai ship with it. Ship after ship was destroyed, and ship after ship kept fighting. "Why won't they stop?" Sirvith asked. His voice was filled with something strange, something he had never felt before. "Fear. Because they cannot stop," Vasquez said. "We do not know how. When we commit to a fight, we fight until we win or until we are dead. There is no middle ground." On the surface of Kairos IV, the ground battle had begun. 40,000 human soldiers held a canyon pass that led to the planet's main civilian population. 2 million Vthkai drones, smaller versions of the space creatures, designed for ground combat, advanced toward them. The humans had fortified the canyon. They had guns and missiles and grenades. They held the line for 6 hours, pouring fire into the endless wave of enemies. Then they ran out of ammunition. A commander named Sarah Chen ordered her troops to fix bayonets. Those without bayonets drew knives. Those without knives picked up rocks. They charged. 2 million Vthkai drones against 40,000 humans armed with sharp metal and stone. The fighting lasted 19 hours. The observers watched through satellite feeds, unable to look away. They saw humans fighting with broken bones, fighting with missing limbs, fighting with wounds that should have killed them. They saw medics injecting soldiers with drugs to keep them conscious so they could keep fighting. They saw engineers strapping explosives to their bodies and running into groups of enemies. At hour 17, a young soldier named James Okonkwo ran out of weapons. He grabbed a Vthkai drone with his bare hands and strangled it while 3 others tore at his flesh. He killed 2 more before he died. At hour 18, a squad leader named Maria Santos was impaled through the chest by a Vthkai spike. She broke off the spike, used it as a spear, and killed 11 more drones before blood loss took her. At hour 19, Human reinforcements finally arrived. They found the canyon filled with bodies. Human and Vthkai piled on top of each other, still locked together, still clawing and biting even in death. And standing among the dead, 800 human survivors. They were covered in blood, their own and their enemies'. Their uniforms were rags. Their weapons were broken. Half of them could barely stand. They were smiling, not with joy, not with happiness. They smiled because they had held the line. They had done what needed to be done. Back in space, the battle reached its climax. The flagship, unconquered, had lost engines, weapons, and most of its crew. Admiral Cole was dead, killed by shrapnel an hour into the battle. Captain Yuki Tanaka had taken command. She looked at the displays. 3 Vthkai command vessels remained, the largest ones. The hearts of the enemy fleet. If they fell, the rest would scatter. The unconquered had one weapon left, a single device that the human military called the Prometheus Lance. It had never been used in actual combat. It was too terrible, too powerful. Tanaka ordered all surviving crew to the escape pods. "Captain," her first officer said, "the guidance systems are destroyed. The Lance cannot be fired remotely." "I know," Tanaka said. "Someone has to aim it manually." She stayed at her post as the escape pods launched. She stayed as the unconquered drifted toward the Vthkai command ships. She stayed as she activated the Prometheus Lance and felt the ship shudder as impossible energies built up in its core. Her last transmission was to Ambassador Vasquez. "Tell them we never wanted to be this. Tell them we are sorry." The Prometheus Lance fired. 3 Vthkai command ships vanished in a light brighter than suns. The explosion was visible from Nexus Prime, 20 light-years away. It burned for 3 hours. When it faded, the Vthkai fleet was broken. The surviving ships fled into the darkness, broadcasting signals that the Council later translated. The signals said, "Do not wake the humans. Let them sleep. Do not make them remember what they are." The battle of last light was over. Humanity had won. But as the galaxy celebrated, the humans did not celebrate with them. They gathered their dead. They counted their losses. They mourned. And they tried very hard not to think about what they had become to win this war. The galaxy had wanted to see what humanity was capable of. Now they knew. And they would never forget. The war lasted 2 years. 2 years of fire and blood and screaming in the darkness between stars. 2 years of humanity pushing the Vthkai back. System by system, battle by battle. 2 years of losses that would have broken any other species in the galaxy. 11 million human soldiers died. 47 colony worlds were destroyed before they could be saved. 3 generation ships, massive vessels carrying hundreds of thousands of civilians, chose to ram Vthkai carriers rather than let themselves be consumed. The families aboard voted. The decision was unanimous. Better to die fighting than to be eaten. When the last Vthkai fleet fled into the void between galaxies, broadcasting their warning to never wake the humans, the galaxy fell silent. There were no celebrations, no parades, no victory speeches. The humans gathered their dead. They built memorials. They held quiet ceremonies where soldiers who had survived stood with empty eyes and tried to remember what peace felt like. The Galactic Council called a special session to honor humanity's sacrifice. Every species attended. For the first time in the Council's history, the Great Hall of Nexus Prime was completely full. High Arbiter Jolan stood at the center of the chamber. He looked older than before. The war had aged him in ways that had nothing to do with his body. "We gather today," he said, "to recognize what humanity has done for all of us. They answered our call for help even though we had rejected them. They fought and died for species who had mocked them. They saved us all." He turned to face the human delegation. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in the same seat she had occupied 2 years ago, when the Council had laughed at her species and called them cowards. She looked tired. The weight of 11 million deaths showed in the lines on her face. "By unanimous vote," Jolan continued, "the Council grants humanity the status of founding guardian species. This is the highest honor we can give. It makes humans equal to the eldest members of our alliance. It grants them permanent seats on all councils and committees. It recognizes them as protectors of the galaxy." The chamber filled with applause. Species that had once dismissed humanity now showed respect, fear, even. Vasquez stood slowly. "Thank you," she said. "But we must decline half of these honors." The applause stopped. Confusion spread through the chamber. "We did not fight for status," Vasquez explained. We did not die for seats on your councils. We fought because someone had to. Because living beings were going to be eaten if no one stopped the Vthkai. She looked around the room at the alien faces watching her. You wanted to understand us. You wanted to know what humanity really is. I think it is time I told you. She stepped forward, her platform moving to the center of the chamber. 30 years ago, you called us cowards. You said we feared war. You believed that our choice of peace was weakness. She paused. You were wrong about everything. The chamber was silent. Every eye was on her. We do not fear war. We fear ourselves in war. We fear how good we are at killing. We fear how much we enjoy it when we let ourselves go. We fear the monster that lives inside every human being, waiting to be released. She pulled up images on the central display. Pictures of Earth, cities, parks, children playing, people living their lives in peace. 10,000 years ago we were animals killing each other with rocks and sticks. We fought over food, over territory, over things that seem foolish now. We killed each other without mercy. We committed acts so terrible that we still cannot speak of them without shame. The images changed. Ancient battlefields, mass graves, the ruins of cities destroyed by human hands. We climbed out of that blood very slowly. It took centuries, millennia. We built rules and laws and treaties. We created art and music and science. We learned to solve problems with words instead of weapons. We became something better than we had been. She looked at Jolan directly. Every time we chose peace over war, every time we negotiated instead of attacked, every time we retreated instead of fought, those were not acts of cowardice. Those were acts of will. We were choosing to be the species we wanted to be, not the species we were born as. The council members listened in complete silence. You saw our restraint and called it weakness. But restraint is not weakness. Restraint is strength. The strongest person in the room is not the one who throws the first punch. It is the one who could destroy everyone but chooses not to. She turned to face the Kalthari delegation. Sirveth sat there, smaller than before, his pride broken by what he had witnessed. You measured strength by willingness to fight. But true strength is knowing when not to fight. It is having the power to destroy and choosing to build instead. That is what humanity has spent 10,000 years learning. Her voice softened. We liked who we were becoming. Peaceful, curious, kind. We valued diplomats over warriors. We built schools instead of battleships. We raised children to believe that violence was the last resort, not the first option. She paused. And then the Vthkai came, and we had to remember what we really are. The images on the display changed again. The Battle of Last Light, the canyon on Kairos IV, the flash of the Prometheus lance. We did not want to fight this war. We did not want to become monsters again. But we did it anyway, because that is what being human means. We sacrifice ourselves for others. We do terrible things so that others do not have to. We carry the darkness so that others can live in light. She looked around the chamber one final time. You asked why we avoided conflict. Now you know. We avoided conflict because we knew what we would become if we embraced it. We avoided conflict because every war takes a piece of our souls that we can never get back. We avoided conflict because we were trying to stay human. She stepped back toward her seat. Make no mistake. We have not forgotten what we are. The monster is still there, inside every one of us. We simply choose not to let it out unless there is no other option. Her voice hardened. And now you will never forget either. You have seen what humanity can do when pushed. You have seen our fury and our sacrifice, and our terrible will to keep fighting long after any sane species would have stopped. She sat down. We ask only one thing in return for what we have done. Remember that we did not want this. Remember that we hate what we became to save you. And remember that the next time you think about provoking humanity, you should ask yourself if you truly want to see what happens when we stop trying to be civilized. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then High Arbiter Jolan spoke. The Council accepts your words, Ambassador, and we will remember. He raised his staff. Let the record show that humanity's file has been updated. The old designation of cowardly and unsuited for conflict is removed. He paused. The new designation reads, do not mistake their mercy for weakness. Do not mistake their restraint for fear. And above all, do not make them fight, because they will not stop until everything that threatened them is gone, and they will hate themselves for every moment of it. That hatred makes them more dangerous than any species we have ever encountered. The session ended. The council members filed out in silence. Many of them looked at the human delegation as they passed. Some with respect, some with fear, some with both. Vasquez remained in her seat until the chamber was empty. Then she stood and walked to the great window that looked out over the stars. So many of those stars now shone because of human sacrifice. So many worlds were safe because humans had chosen to become monsters to protect them. She wondered if it had been worth it. She wondered if humanity would ever feel clean again. She knew the answer to both questions was probably no, but she also knew that if she had to make the choice again, she would make the same one, because that was what being human meant, carrying the weight of terrible choices so that others could live, and hoping that someday, somehow, they might find their way back to the light. Outside the window, the stars burned on, silent witnesses to the price of salvation, and somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the Vthkai fled, carrying with them a warning that would echo through the universe for eternity. Do not wake the humans. Let them sleep. Do not make them remember what they are, because if you do, nothing in this universe will save you from what comes next.